Welcome to the Week 14 final season wrap up here at this 15th season of Blood, Sweat, and Beers. The table has been set, the place cards are out, names are inscribed in some pretty form of calligraphy, and we are ready to dance. Seems like a terribly mixed metaphor, but anyway, playoff table is set. It was an interesting flip towards the end. We'll call it a mini Monday Night Miracle, not a full-on miracle, but John was able to outlast Gloop to take that number one seed. But we'll touch on that as we look at the scores from this past week. Our first score there, Kamish versus Keith. Kamish took care of business. It was a long shot to keep Keith out of the playoffs and therefore away from his third straight, fourth overall championship. Obviously, if you don't make the playoffs, you can't win the championship. So that was the first task. Kamish did his job. On the strength of Lamar Jackson, posting 40 points, was able to post plenty of points to get past Team Houdat. Obviously, with Justin Jefferson going out, you could call that an asterisk. Both teams left pretty significant points, or at least one player each on the bench. But in the end, Kamish made a clean sweep of Team Keith and did his part. Doesn't matter. Keith slides into the playoffs for the 9th time. We'll see him in the playoffs at the 6th seed. And Kamish slides in at number 5, also making his 9th appearance in the playoffs since being in the league. Our next score, we got the Wilmot brothers duking it out for bragging rights. Now, there's probably nothing to brag about there, but Donnie was able to beat up on Joe. Probably a little bit of a historic look back at their relationship, I'm sure, as they were both in the house together growing up. Put a pretty significant beat down on Joe, who's just having one of those years. We've all had them, and well, hopefully next year will be a little bit better. I will say that I hope Joe does not end up in last place at the end of the playoff run here. He changes his name regularly anyway. That seems like it would be a lot less fun to change his name on the regular. But we'll see. We'll see how all that breaks down. Despite negative points at the quarterback position, Donnie was still able to put up close to 150 points. Unfortunately, he was already out of the playoffs, misses the playoffs for the first time since he's been in the league. So duking it out in the consolation ladder, hoping to keep his naming rights. We'll see. Light Rail Coyote could probably use a punch up. Probably could use some adjustments there. But our next score that we're looking at, Aaron versus Jersey Birds. It was relatively close by the time it was over. I mean, 18 points is not all that close, but as Ian acknowledged, he rode that CJ Stroud train 1 week too long. He puts Justin Fields in, he wins, and because Keith lost, he would have made the playoffs. He would have been that last number 6 seed. And unfortunately, he's now on the outside looking in, missing the playoffs for the first time since he's been with us here at Blood, Sweat, and Beers, hoping that he gets to retain his naming rights at the end of the season. We'll have to see how that goes. Gloop versus Poncho. That was much more interesting than I thought it would be going into the week. First of all, they had already made the playoffs, already secured the division, so they already had the first round bye each. There was nothing there to really play for, but in the end, it did flip the seeding just a little bit. We'll look at the consolation or the winners bracket, the playoff bracket here in a minute to see how that changed it. But Miami's defense, when they got that touchdown early in the game, you just kind of had a sense that they were going to be able to get those 19 points that they needed, that Poncho needed them to get to take the number 1 seed, which he does. So Poncho's riding a hot hand now, so this will be interesting, making just his 7th trip to the playoffs, breaking a 6-year drought He's finally back in the playoffs after a cool half dozen years muddling about at the bottom of the conferences here. Be interesting to see. He's taking his average over the past month, 150, almost 155 points. That's a hot hand. Highest over the past month. We'll see if he can continue that. He gets this week off, but we'll see if that continues in the next round, depending on who he plays. Gloop, on the other hand, stumbles for the third loss in a row, down to just under 130 points a game over the last 4 weeks. He, however, is making his 12th trip to the playoffs here in Blood, Sweat, and Beers. That is unprecedented. That is the single highest number of trips to the playoff appearances of any team that has been with us. So he knows how to get there. We've seen him win in the past. Will this bye week give his team the break they need to get back on track? We'll have to see how he comes out of the break into the second round of the playoffs when that comes. The last score to take a look at, Ertz and Puzzles. Puzzles was already in the playoffs. He sort of backed in. Lost by 40 points. It was nice to see Alex Billy put up some points. Unfortunately, just over 100 the 3 weeks before. Had already been knocked out of the playoffs. Had nothing much to fight for. But a strong showing in the end. Didn't ruin anything. Didn't much change anything. I think perhaps the loss for Puzzles bumped him down to number 4, which gave Aaron the chance to bump up to number 3. So that'll change the seedings just a little bit. But Puzzles then sticking to his brag that he's never missed the playoffs in any season playing fantasy football. He made it in this time with us. So we'll see what he can do with that. But continues his run, his first playoff appearance in his first season with us. Now that's historic as well. We typically have someone first year make the playoffs with us. And he continues at 4 straight seasons with a new player to the league making the playoffs. 5 out of 6 of the past seasons. But it still remains that no first-year team that was with us from the draft has ever won the championship. Aaron was the closest. He took over that team that he took to the championship about a month in. So he wasn't part of the draft, missed the first month, replaced that owner, and went to the championship, won that year. So close, but not quite. So we'll see if Seth Mike can set some records here, if he can make history here with Blood, Sweat, and Beers and be the first year team to draft and win the championship. We'll see. Let's take a look at the winner's bracket, the playoff bracket here as we look at Pancho. He shoots up to number 1, riding that hot hand, got his mojo going. He's going to get that nice bye week, and Gloop at the bottom, the same. He was locked in for quite a while, kind of the presumptive number 1. Slipped a little at the end, see what he can do after coming out of the bye week. But we look at Howell and Puzzles. Interesting matchup there. Over the last month or so, Kamish is averaging about 10 more points a game than Puzzles. He's stumbled a little bit towards the end of the season, but we know he can put up 180, 190, 200. So we'll see which team shows up. Projections currently have Kamish at about 10 points over. We'll see if that holds. We know projections mean absolutely nothing once the players step onto the field. So we'll take a look there. Houdat and Aaron. It amazes me that we're still talking about Keith in the playoffs. But Aaron, it's time to take care of business. It's time to move on. You've already got 2 championships. It's time for you to look for your third and knock Keith out. Do what we all have been trying to all season long, and make good on his challenge to us to not let him get a 4th. That would be terrible. I'm not sure what would happen to the league next year. I'm not sure there would be a league next year. I think it would just be Keith's league. We don't want to live in a world like that. So, Aaron, take care of business. And actually, as we look at the winner's bracket here, this group represents 10 of the championships over the last 15 years. Obviously, Seth Mike in his first year, he's got the goose egg. He's trying for his first. But as we see here, everyone has at least one, multiples across the board here. So high probability somebody's looking at an additional championship, and they get to match up the trophies, the Pilsners that they already have. Looking at the consolation ladder, just because the bracket there, because I don't want these guys to feel left out. Jersey Birds and Light Rail, go for it. Pet Detectives and Alex Billy, have a good time. I guess one thing to note is that we don't have a last place team until the final week of the playoffs. So it's not just the final standings at the end of the regular season, but you have to play through the playoffs. And while even though this group only represents one championship overall, we know that they can still put up some numbers. They can represent well. And so if I can give a bit of advice here, I can tell you that as you look at the playoff bracket across the consolation ladder here, the most important game is not this first one. This first one actually means nothing. The second game, that is the most important game to win. If you win next week, you're put into game 5, consolation bracket game 5, which means win or lose, you cannot be in last place. Now, obviously, if you lose this week and you're put down into that lower game, you're risking playing game 6. Now, if you lose game 6, you're in last place. So if you lose next week, you need to win the final week. But if you win next week, doesn't matter what you do in the final week, you can't be in last place. So just some things to think about as you think about how important it is to hang on to your naming rights, looking across the winner's bracket, who might be able to rename your team and how often. We'll see if that's any incentive on either side. Enjoy week 1 of the playoffs.